talking SEC football. And I'm going to give you now to Daily Journal sports editor John Pitts, and he'll introduce Logan Lowery, and we will get the ball rolling. John, take off.
Thanks a lot, Parrish. You guys hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Excellent, good. We were just strapping things together here. I would like to sort of start the show here, I think, what we're going to talk about today with Logan, because Mississippi State made national waves with their victory at LSU. Really in control of the game through 3 quarters, and then things got kind of interesting and hairy there at the end. Anybody who doesn't think that LSU was in a position to win that game obviously didn't stay up late to watch Arizona beat Cal on a Hail Mary on the last play. Logan, what did we learn about Mississippi State, and what have we yet to learn from Mississippi State based on what you saw in Baton Rouge?
Well, we learned it there for real. We through the first 3 weeks, really played 3 cupcakes there in a row. We kind of thought that Mississippi State had a good team this year. It looked like they had a lot of depth. Looked like the offense was really clicking. The defense was lights out. But really didn't know because they hadn't played any competition just yet. So, what better competition than to play in one of the most hostile environments in all of college football, which is Death Valley on a Saturday night. And I think that's where opposing teams' hopes go to die. I think that's what the slogan was. But Mississippi State controlled that game right from the jump. They went down there and scored on their first drive. Really controlled the game for probably 58 out of the 60 minutes that they played. But Dan Mullen admitted this week that he learned a lot in that game. Just in that last couple of minutes, and he said that 2 LSU players got hurt, kind of down there on the goal line when they were trying to close the game out for Mississippi State. 2 LSU players got hurt on the same play, and Dan Mullen just kind of panicked and didn't want to get any of his players hurt, so he started subbing. And he realized that he kind of just subbed too early in that game, gave LSU a chance. Obviously, LSU's bench is a little deeper and more talented than Mississippi State's bench is right now. So he learned a little bit in that regard, about you got to close games out, and really the first time he was been in that kind of position on the road in the SEC.
Tell you what, let me respond to
Parrish,
that.
Did you have a chance to take a look at that game?
Yeah, I did, and I thought what I took away from it. And I tell you, I don't see State a whole lot during the year, but I had to, I watched most of that game, and I'll tell you, I think anybody who was paying attention before the game thought that Mississippi State was going down there with a chance to win. I don't think anybody was surprised that State went down there prepared and competed hard and played well. I thought LSU did not. I thought LSU looked a little unprepared and almost like they were taking State for granted. When you get down there with the 1st and goal inside the 5, to me, if you're running the ball 3 straight times, 4 straight times right at State, that's their strength. That's what they want you to do. I mean, I thought it called for different play calling down there. And on Dak Prescott's long touchdown run, the call they were in defensively, with no safety on the back end, I thought that was a great call for State against a poor call for LSU defensively there. But they just seemed to lack. I don't know. I thought they lacked some energy, with the penalties and whatnot. And I don't want to take anything away from State, which was very prepared and played like they have played against the Cupcakes on their schedule. So they were in control, but I thought we didn't see a very good preparation from LSU in that game, and they just kind of floundered along, and all of a sudden when they felt like they needed to do something different at quarterback, it was too late.
Logan, let me swing it back to you for a second. How significant is the 1-game suspension for the center, Dylan Day? My take on it is that really hurt him in this situation, that he had a half game that he sat out before last year, I believe, in a game for some possible misbehavior. What was your takeaway there? I know the fan base was very upset with Les Miles, very upset with the SEC offense.
Yeah, they were, and I agree with you, John. I think his track record he stomped on a player during the Auburn game last year. for the first half against Troy last year. So just having that track record already against you, was one strike, and then when it happens twice during the game against LSU, that's, I guess, the third strike, and you're out for a game. But it's a significant move for Mississippi State. He's a team captain. He's a 4-year starter at center for Mississippi State, and part of the problem, we talked about, Mississippi State's inability to close out last week's game. Part of that was because backup center Archie Muniz snapped the ball past Dak Prescott. And I don't think that you'll see Archie Muniz in the game against Texas A&M in a couple of weeks. I think you'll probably see Ben Beckwith shift over from right guard over into center, and then Jamal Claiborne or Devin Desper will fill in at right guard for them. So they're going to have to do some shuffling along that offensive line. But the good news is for Mississippi State, they've basically had 2 weeks to prepare for that. They found out about the suspension early this, and they'll be able to kind of shift and adjust and allow that offensive line to gel a little bit together in order to get into that game. And it's not the first time that Ben Beckwith's played center. He played center in the spring game for Mississippi State because Dylan Day was hurt. So I think that's kind of their backup plan right now.
Parrish, you say Ole Miss and Memphis, and one of the other guys in the office jokes that Ole Miss took Memphis off the schedule just in time for Memphis to collapse as a program, and now that Memphis has improved a little bit, lo and behold, they're back on the Ole Miss schedule. How are you feeling about that? How are they feeling about that? And is there anything worrisome about what Memphis is trying to do offensively that's not a thing that Ole Miss typically will see in an SEC schedule? I haven't seen them. I just have read a little bit. They run an option, I suppose, and that's befuddled UCLA a little bit, a very talented UCLA defense, before they were able to get the victory out in Los Angeles. What's the buzz about Ole Miss and Memphis?
Well, I tell you what, the thing about Memphis that I see, John, is they are executing their offense. They're doing what they want to do. There were several years there where they couldn't get out of their own way, as we say. And they're going to run some misdirection. They're going to get their wide receivers involved in the run game. They're going to do things like that. And to me, the concern is going to be Ole Miss defensively staying home and making plays, because the theme that we have heard defensively from the Rebels for 2 weeks now is gap control, gap integrity, being in the right place on defense. And we're hearing players this week talk about trusting the scheme, how they need to do that better, not trying to make every play. Well, you know what? If you see a guy running wide with the football one way, it could be pretty tempting to take off full speed after him and leave a hole in the defense. And if you do that against Memphis, it's pretty sure that there's going to be a handoff or a toss, and the ball is going to come back the other way, and there'll be potentially a big gain there for Memphis. So I think the big thing for the Rebels right now is going to be to do the things they've talked about during the week. That's going to be to fit the gaps better, to put a little more control and discipline, and stay home and not take off after every ball that goes off one direction wide. I think Memphis has executed its offense better. I think it's clearly an improvement. I think Ole Miss is going to be the talented and deeper team, but this is a Memphis team that could end up being, outside of Boise, the Rebels' toughest non-conference challenge. I wouldn't have thought that back in August.
I almost wonder if this is going to play out a little bit like that Boise game, where by the end the margin may reflect the improved talent that Ole Miss can bring to bear in the fourth quarter. But it wouldn't surprise me if this wasn't a close game at halftime.
Well, I think it could be that game where the teams are kind of feeling themselves out early. One reason that Boise game was 7-6 going into the fourth quarter was because of 3 first-half interceptions thrown by Bo Wallace. You go back to that Boise game, and remember, Ole Miss had opportunities. They just kind of squandered them away. That did not need to be a 7-6 game that late. Since that first half against Boise, Bo Wallace has played much better. 8 touchdown passes, 1 interception, making better decisions. He's really been accurate. I mean, he's completing like 75%. I mean, that's incredible. If Bo Wallace has time to throw, and this is another if factor in the game, he's been extremely accurate. He's been well protected most of this season. Memphis comes in after getting 5 sacks last week against Middle Tennessee. You know, they have a defense that will dial up a lot of different pressure packages, and they've shown an ability to get to the quarterback. So that'll be another key in this game. Can the Rebels protect Bo Wallace?
I have jokingly referred to the week of October 4th as Football Mageddon in Mississippi. We're talking about Alabama coming to Oxford and Texas A&M visiting Starkville. It's a very exciting possibility that day, a couple of day games. I know State fans not all that thrilled about an 11 a.m. kickoff after the Bulldog Bash, but
I bet Logan is.
Perhaps so. Logan, let's start with you, and not just talking about next week. I mean, State's got an off week to prepare, but they've got a 1-2 punch to deal with. Both teams do, really. But we're talking about Texas A&M on October the 4th, and then here comes Auburn into Starkville on October the 11th. How much is there game planning or any thinking that goes on about trying to grapple with both of these challenges, or is it strictly a trying to deal with what Texas A&M will bring to bear, and a team that has excelled offensively, but I'm not sure they've been, this A&M team has been tested by a good defense yet.
Well, this will be the 5th time that Dan Mullen has squared off against Kevin Sumlin. He faced him twice when he was at the University of Houston, and then, of course, 2 times against Texas A&M. And that offense is very difficult to prepare for. And if Mississippi State has a vulnerability on the team right now, it's in their defensive secondary, and that's definitely going to be tested in the next couple of weeks with Texas A&M and Auburn coming to town. But I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago, just the stretch that Mississippi State's going to have to go through. I think I referred to it as a gauntlet. Just the fact that they had to play 3 top 10 opponents in their own division, over the next 3 games anyway. You had LSU, and then you got Texas A&M, and Auburn coming in. The toughest that I thought among that group was to win at LSU on the road, because Mississippi State hadn't done that since 1991. But then you got these 2 games at home, which I thought coming into the year these would be winnable games for Mississippi State, and they definitely can be. But I did not expect Texas A&M to be this good this quickly. I thought by the end of the season they would be a good team, but they lost so much from last year's squad, and I didn't know that they could recover just as quickly as they did. And they're definitely I guess a confident and quality opponent for Mississippi State to face. But their focus in this off week for Mississippi State has kind of been just going back to the fundamentals, getting some guys healed up. Right tackle Justin Senior had his knee scoped on Monday. He's been out. They've had to do some shuffling along the offensive line with that and the suspension of Dylan Day. So Mississippi State's worked on a few things. They're actually going to take some time away from football. They practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they'll practice again this afternoon. And according to Dan Mullen, I asked him about it, and he said that if everybody has their schoolwork together, he's going to give them Friday and Saturday off, and then they'll report back Sunday night. So they'll get a little bit of time away from football, which may seem bad, but at the end of the day, you got to remember that these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and a lot of them miss their mamas.
Well, they may enjoy sitting around watching Memphis beat Ole Miss on Saturday. I am kidding. That would never happen. Memphis would never win in Oxford. I am reminded, of course, of I guess the game in 2003. That was a long, long time ago, and we'll let that pass. But Parrish, I do want to talk about. We are assuming, and there's a lot of assuming going on, that Ole Miss gets past Memphis. If they do, that sets up this enormous game against Alabama. And then, gosh, they've got to go to College Station and play Texas A&M. Before the season, you would have said, well, this presents 2 different kinds of challenges. Alabama's going to try to pound the ball, and then Texas A&M's going to do the Texas A&M thing. But now all of a sudden, I called it Air Saban in Sunday's paper, the Kiffin offense, Amari Cooper, who it does not appear can be stopped. Everybody on the Florida team had to know they were going to try to throw to him in that game, and nobody's been able to deal with him up to this point. What does that 1-2 challenge look like to you in terms of what Ole Miss has to do after this Memphis game?
Well, it is interesting, John, when you talk about Amari Cooper. You know, I look at Laquan Treadwell for Ole Miss, and we've heard so much talk about him as being one of the top wide receivers in the country, and that they really haven't forced the issue in trying to get the ball to Treadwell the way that Alabama has with Cooper. And when I look at Cooper's numbers, I think 33, 35 catches right now, big plays, explosive plays. I mean, the Alabama offense says to me that you can force the issue and get that guy involved and make him, help him become a game breaker for you. Ole Miss has a much better supporting cast at wide receiver than Alabama does, and that bunch is coming through right now. That's one reason you're not seeing Ole Miss force the issue with Laquan Treadwell. But what Cooper does for Alabama is, he basically shifts the defense. He forces you to put your defenders wherever he goes, and and they've done a good job of using that to create some space in the run game as well. It all comes back to stopping the run. I think if Ole Miss can do that against Alabama, that they're going to have a good chance. They'll compete and they'll slow things down if they can, slow Alabama at the line of scrimmage to start. And one of the other things we've seen, and I saw Saban talk about during the week with Alabama, has been, while there have been some explosive plays, he's not been happy with turnovers and penalties. So it's an interesting matchup for Ole Miss, and we're not supposed to look ahead. I know we're all supposed to be one game at a time all the time, but assuming the Rebels get past Memphis, I think they're better equipped to compete against Alabama this year. I think they're just a little bit better on offense, a little bit deeper, a little bit more mature. I think there are some things that help Ole Miss more than a year ago. I think they're more able to compete in that game. But you follow that up with Texas A&M. You go back to August, a lot of people were penciling in Texas A&M as a W, but that's looking a lot more like coaching and a system than just one quarterback in Johnny Manziel. That offense, it was efficient. It was high scoring before Johnny Manziel and Kevin Sumlin were ever together, and now it's Kevin Sumlin is showing that again, that he knows how to put a good offense out on the field. Defensively, I think it's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see what State gets done against Texas A&M, because that's a high-risk defense. They blitz a lot. They're leading the league in sacks right now, but traditionally that hasn't been their strong point. So, it's several tough weeks in succession coming up for both State and Ole Miss.
Well, the Ole Miss and State receivers need to be on notice that if they try to run over Reveille, that there's a guy out there who'll seal their fate. They are not going to trifle with the mascot being threatened by guys running in off the sidelines. So that's one of the most impressive clean hits that I've seen in college football season, was the young man that stepped up to protect the dog at the Texas A&M game.
Hey, John, and one thing about that real quick, watching that video, that wasn't just a hit, man. There was a lot of finesse in there, the way he guided that SMU football player, just kind of guided him. It was like a shadow block or something, just kind of took him out of the play. He didn't nail him. He just kind of moved him away from his guy, protecting Reveille there.
I believe that young man will someday be leading forces against ISIS, and I don't think ISIS will stand a chance if they send him over there. So we shall see. Let's talk a little bit about the league as a whole. I'll take this with both of you. Parrish, start with you. Does Mississippi State beating LSU or anything else you've seen to this point give you pause or make you think differently about the SEC Western Division race?
At the beginning of the season, we talked about transition among the upper tier teams and how it was wide open and just about everybody had a shot. And I think LSU's performance kind of underscores that. I mean, think about the game. They had put up really impressive defensive numbers against Sam Houston State and Northeast Louisiana. Yes, that's right. I still refer to Louisiana Monroe in that way. Right, the back-to-back shutouts, okay, really good defensive numbers. So that tells you that they have some talent, they have speed, they get to the ball. I didn't think they looked prepared against State, but I think there's enough talent there that, look, that team can look better in the middle of the year if they get it going, especially on defense. And they've got some issues on offense at quarterback right now, and a lot of people talk about that LSU run game, and I think it's going to be good, but I think State showed that can be contained a little bit as well. So, I think LSU has some ground to cover and some miles to get behind them, if you will, to be the kind of team that we're used to seeing from LSU. Even Alabama right now, you look at the turnovers and penalties on offense against Florida. That Florida game should have been in control a lot earlier than it was for Alabama. That just says that what we thought back in August is true. I mean, I don't think that winning the West is going to be easy for anyone. If it's going to be if someone's about to dethrone Alabama, if someone is about to rise up, whether that's well, it was Auburn last year, but if there's going to be a newcomer, if it's going to be an Ole Miss or a State, they're going to have to play well and play hard. It's not going to be easy. But I think that someone different from the Western Division in Atlanta this year is that's you can reach that conclusion based on what we've seen early on.
Logan, I'll kick that over to you. And did what you saw in Baton Rouge make you think a little differently about how that Western race might play out?
I don't know that it made me think any differently. It kind of what I expected as far as I didn't think that LSU and Alabama and Auburn were quite as good as they have been in the last few years, and they may be trickling down a little bit, and some teams like Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas were a little better than they have been in the last few years. So I think those two teams are kind of starting to come together, and everybody's kind of jumbled together. And, still a lot of football left to be played. Just the fact that 6 out of the 7 teams in the Western Division are ranked among the top 25 is pretty amazing. I mean, you talk about the Western Division being the toughest division and the toughest conference in all of college football, and it's definitely living up to the bill right now. Even Arkansas, just look at the way they were able to run the ball last year and this year. It's pretty impressive, and they're not going to be a pushover. They're kind of the doormat of the SEC West right now, but they're a pretty good football team in and of themselves.
John, talking about the West a little bit, I ran some numbers during the week. The Western Division of the SEC right now is 24-2. They've got, a lot of those wins have come against some Sam Houston States and La Monroes and everything, but a lot of them have not. There's some quality wins in there, and there's been some West-on-West violence with Auburn winning over Arkansas on opening day, and then State winning over LSU. I mean, when we look at the conference as a whole, the bottom is just better. I mean, Tennessee and Arkansas are better. But among those bad teams, those bottom teams from last year, Arkansas is the best, I think. They're protecting the ball and they are imposing their will. That's going to be a tough game for Ole Miss on the road in November. You can't just chalk that one up as a W now. The West, I think the West is not only a little better than most divisions in college football, it's way out in front.
I'm going to pass on much discussion of the East today because I want to save a couple of minutes for both of you here at the end before we wrap up to talk about recruiting. I'll just say that there hasn't been a worse loss outside the league than Missouri losing at home to Indiana. And to me, it sort of takes them off the board as a piece to be taken seriously in the East race, a title defense for them. But, next time we sit down and talk, we may see this differently. But I thought that was a bad beat for them. They just did not manage the end of that game very well against a really awful Indiana team. I don't know. It was just kind of inexplicable. Logan, let me go back to you and give us a couple of minutes of reflection on where Mississippi State is on the recruiting trail. In Sunday's paper, you will kind of take the temperature of the recruiting scene for the Bulldogs on an off week, as we often do. It appears that they are doing well. That they are ranking well in the national rankings, some of which have to do with the number of kids you sign as opposed to the quality of them. But just a quick snapshot there on Mississippi State recruiting at this point.
Obviously, I'm not as in-depth on Mississippi State recruiting as maybe I have been in the last 5 years or so when that was my primary job. But, of course, I still keep tabs on it. I know a lot of these kids, when they were younger, you know, especially when they were, you know, sophomores and junior and freshmen, and you know, I saw them a few times then. But, you know, Mississippi State's put together an incredible class, probably the best one that Dan Mullen has signed. The only one that even rivals it is his initial class in 2009. They got something like 20, I think they only have about 4 or 5 scholarships even left to give out if this class holds up. And, of course, there's a long time between now and February, and a lot can happen in recruiting. Then, you know, we call, I guess, December and January kind of silly season. When they, you know, start taking those official visits and things just kind of go haywire with a lot of the recruiting stuff. But, you know, Mississippi State was able to create a lot of buzz this summer, especially at their big dog camp. They had something like 8 commitments or whatever it was on that night, and it was a lot of that was staged, and it did create a lot of momentum and a lot of buzz surrounding that program. And they've been able to get a majority of the top in-state players, and that's kind of been Dan Mullen's forte for his first few years at Mississippi State. He wanted to get that in-state talent. I know he talked day one about guys like Jerry Rice and Brett Favre and Steve McNair, some of the top players ever to come out of Mississippi, and none of them went to Mississippi State, and that was an oversight by some coaching staffs in years past, and he did not want to recreate that. He wanted to get those top players from Mississippi to play for Mississippi State University, and he signed a lot of them over the last 5-6 years.
Parrish, the Ole Miss recruiting class, by the nature of the roster, is going to be smaller, but it's still potentially impactful. And big news this week, Leo Lewis, wherever he's from, I apologize, I blanked on that, a linebacker, I believe. A big commitment this week, had been committed to Alabama. Still a lot of time for him to commit someplace else also. But what's the snapshot there in terms of recruiting?
Tell you what, Leo Lewis was a big pickup. Again, every pickup you get right now, as you say, has an asterisk because, you know, they are verbal commitments, and you know, we all know that takes on a different kind of definition. But Leo Lewis is, you know, to see him in an Ole Miss uniform next year would be really important. You know, they're seeing D.T. Shackelford take a lot of snaps at middle linebacker right now. They've got a junior college transfer in Christian Russell behind him. They've got a freshman in DeMarcus Gates that they're pretty high on. But I think they're playing Shackelford a lot right now because those guys are kind of still learning their way around. They really haven't had the light come on, so to speak, in terms of making big plays at that position. To bring a guy like Leo Lewis in there to compete would, you know, certainly improve the situation at that position and would continue in the theme of improving depth for this defense that we've seen. But the other thing we've seen from Ole Miss more recently has been its focus on the offensive line with Drew Richmond from Memphis, Alex Givens from the Nashville area, you know, continuing to focus in that area and trying to build quality depth there. You know, you would hope that you see this elite talent that they got in the class of 2013, and you know, you want to put more guys like that in the program for those elite players to play with, and that takes time. And when you start that clock ticking, you know, that group, that's a sophomore class now. Most of them are going to be gone after their junior year, so you know, there's not a lot of time left to really get talent around that group.
I really enjoyed rejoining you guys this week. Had some technical difficulties last week for me. This is fun. Next week, Football-mageddon in Mississippi, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about. May talk a little bit more game preview stuff if you wish, but very much enjoyed hanging out with you guys today and looking forward to doing it again.
Well, it's been good, and I have enjoyed it as well, and we're going to sign off, folks. Come back and join us next week right here.